Hey, Panther Nation. Have you ever crashed your spin scooter going down Cardiac Hill? Or wiped out on an icy sidewalk in South Oakland? Have you ever been hit by a bus crossing Forbes Avenue? Well, you may not have to pay that hospital bill on your own. If you're hurt in an accident, pick up the phone and call Guido at Guerrera Law. Guido Guerrera is a University of Pittsburgh Law School grad, Pitt Football superfan, and experienced personal injury attorney who's licensed in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And it is 100% free to call him for consultation on your personal injury case. So the next time you get rear-ended in Oakland rush hour traffic, or if you fall down the stairs at Peters, call Guido. All joking aside, Oakland and the world can be a very dangerous place. If you need legal help, talk to Guido. He'll treat you like a fellow Pitt fan and never like a number. 412-229-7757 is the number to call. That's 412-229-7757 to call Guido. You can also contact Guerrera Law at guerreralaw.com. That's Gurrera. Call Guido today. Please welcome onto the show a very special guest, college football writer for ESPN, David Hale. David, how you doing today?
I'm well, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. I'm always excited to hang out with some Pitt folks. Don't tell any of the other fan bases, but they are my favorite ACC fan base.
Well, that's funny because every other fan base is your least favorite, I thought.
That's also true. Well, technically, I went to Syracuse, so I have mixed feelings about them. Everybody else is terrible. So it goes Pitt, Syracuse, then everybody else.
What makes Pitt fans, what gives them a special place in your heart?
I feel like we have the same approach to sports and life in that it is this thing that means so much to us, and that we have the highest of hopes and passion, and yet also are vaguely aware that there's an anvil hanging precariously over our head at any given moment, and it will end up like a Bugs Bunny cartoon at the worst possible time. I've largely lived that existence for most of my life, so I have a real, I don't know. We as the kids say these days, I think we vibe well together. So I'm here for that. I appreciate that Pitt fans are thrilled when you say something nice about them, and are willing to commiserate with you when you have to say something bad happened. And that is all I ask for from an engaged fan base.
I think we shit talk ourselves so much that we're used to it. You can't hurt us because we hurt ourselves.
It is
more than anybody.
It's Eminem in 8 Mile. You 8 Mile yourself, and no one else can hurt you now.
No one can be meaner to us than we are to ourselves.
Exactly. It's a brilliant maneuver.
You probably have to toe such a line with Pitt fans, because if you say something nice about us, we're very suspicious about it. But if you say something mean about the team, we will jump down your throat in the replies. But we don't take compliments well, because your analogy is correct. There is an anvil hanging over our head at all times, and that anvil is going to throw 2 ugly picks against Louisville in a game that we should have won.
No, I totally get it. I mean, I feel this exact same way. I'm personally bad at taking compliments. I don't know. I've been told, my wife says you should just say thank you and move on with your day. And I can't do that because it totally screws up whatever version of myself I had in my head when someone says something nice. And I was like, no, wait, should I believe this? No, it's just going to come back to bite me.
It's a trap.
Yes, it's a trap. I find, though, the nice thing about Pitt is they, in the grand scheme of things, within the scope of what I typically cover, I find they are often an undervalued commodity, which is to say they will be better than most people think. They will not be good enough to fully reach the optimistic hopes and dreams of Pitt fans, but they will be better than people are typically giving them credit for. And so I try to find that happy middle ground.
That's about exactly how we feel about it. And I think deep down we know that's who we truly are, but we also have these champagne dreams that, well, if we just reinvigorate the city of Pittsburgh, if we get an on-campus stadium, if we can build off of this momentum, we can return to the glories of the 70s and 80s. You know, we won 9 national championships. Don't ask me what year those were in, but we won 9 national championships. It can
At
happen
least one
again.
of them was in my lifetime, but that probably is more of a detriment to me at my old age than it is a compliment to Pitt at this point. But look, I think Pitt. This is my genuine opinion, having covered college sports for a large number of years now. Pitt fans are really great in that they are engaged without routinely being like over the top, ridiculous, sensitive. Like I'm sure it feels like Pitt fans are sensitive when you're around a lot of Pitt fans, but like be around a lot of like 2 Miami fans, and it's worse than the entirety of Pitt's fan base. But it is a team that, again, a program that folks understand the history, have an appreciation for it, have actually done it, and while it's probably, I mean, the way that college football is set up now, it makes it really hard to say any team like Pittsburgh is going to have a national championship season again, because that's just, we just hand the trophy to Georgia or Alabama at the beginning of every year. But, they've been good enough that a few crazy bounces here or there in a different way, and all of a sudden you're like, well, it's possible, not ridiculous. I was doing research for a TV show that I do on ACC Network with Andrea Addison today, and we were doing. This is one of my. I'll go on a tangent here for just a second. I friggin' hate that NFL draft coverage is entirely about like the combine through the draft, and like these players never spent a day in college, and everyone who has been writing about them and reporting on them and talking to them for the last 4 years knows nothing anymore. Frustrates the hell out of me. And we don't ever pay attention to like the draft from a lens of college. So one of the things that we wanted to do on our show today was talk about how these guys that are leaving in the draft will be replaced, or who steps up, or who kind of fills the gap at the college level on those teams. So we were talking about Kalijah Kancey and the turnover on the D-line for Pitt. And so I was doing some research, and this is a stat I came across. Number of player seasons of 10 tackles for loss and 5 sacks by defensive linemen since 2015. Clemson has 9 of them. Pitt has 9 of them. And we talk about Clemson as if they have just been churning out D linemen to the NFL, and Pitt's been putting up these kind of numbers on the D line too. It's not insane to say Pitt has a pretty high ceiling and talent. It doesn't ever seem to coalesce all together at the same time.
It's always in weird spots. Like I believe that we are D-line U, between Kancey and Jones and Weaver and Haba, and I could list on Twyman. I won't keep doing Aaron Donald. Okay, that was the last one. And then we always end up with like these corners that end up 5th, 6th round picks, but then are quality starters in the NFL. It's just like, okay, but can we also get like a good quarterback at the same time, or one of our many fine running backs, or heaven forbid a receiver? Like, can we get all of that at once? And that's kind of what 2021 felt like for us. And it's a little bit disappointing that our perfect season, I think we're still a little bit undervalued by pollsters in the national media, but it was such a special occurrence for us because for 40 years we've been putting together teams that have all of these guys that go on to the pros and are all world, but we can never form a team around them.
I think it's funny when the national media looks, it's like, wait, Pitt had this pro, and this pro all at the same time, and they won 7 games. And it's also really funny when you see a list of, it's usually sacks nowadays. It's like teams with the most sacks since 2018, Georgia, Alabama, Pitt. It's like, Pitt?
Aaron Donald, James Conner, and Tyler Boyd famously played for the same 7-win Pitt team.
And this is sort of Pitt's probably as good an example of this as there is, but like that's the demarcation between like the teams that can be very good year in and year out, and the teams that have a real chance at winning a national championship. It's that the teams like Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia are just pulling in so much talent that you can afford to miss here, have a couple of guys leave early there, and you've still got a pretty balanced full roster. Like the stars have to align for the Pitts of the world. It's funny because, Pat coming from Michigan State, I feel like that's another program that it's like, if everything kind of lines up, like they've got 2 or 3 pros every year and sometimes 5 or 6 of them, but there's always a gaping hole somewhere that keeps them from getting to the next level until the stars align. And then maybe there's a magical year like TCU had last year. But I think college football is better when those stars align a little more frequently than they have recently for teams like Pitt.
And stars don't fly across the country to Pac-12 powerhouses for a large sum of money. Yes.
Allegedly.
Yeah. This put me in the biggest moral quandary I think I've had as a college football writer too, because I fully embrace like player empowerment. They deserve to get money. They deserve to have freedom. And then I look at something like Jordan Addison leaving, and I think that freaking sucks, man. Like that just sucks. And as a fan, like you can say like that's the right thing. It's the right thing, right? I mean, I'd rather go play as a wide receiver with Caleb Williams than Keaton Slovis. Like that's the right thing. But it sucked. It sucked.
I think Pitt fans have finally arrived at a place where we realize he might have very well made the right decision millions of dollars living in Southern California, catching the football from
upside.
Caleb. It's some upside. I think our disappointment is a lot more with college football and Lincoln Riley at this point than Jordan Addison, because I think he made the decision a lot of us would have made. But also, like, you aren't allowed to go to a guy who is on another roster and say, how many zeros should I put on this check? It's not allowed. And and I know everyone doesn't, everyone kind of does that now, but the NCAA should be enforcing that.
It is. We could probably spend the next hour talking about this. Like it is,
and we don't have to.
The situation is a mess. I mean, that's the bottom line. And then I love Pat. I think he's a really good football coach and a good person. He is definitely old school in his approach to this or anything really. But
he's an Italian from Youngstown.
Yes, exactly.
It is what it is.
So, he was never going to be the guy that was playing, fast and loose with the modern rules. And so he was inevitably going to get screwed somewhere along the line too. The system is set up to reward people who will push the envelope because there is no enforcement mechanism. And I don't know that the NCAA has any interest in anything more than sort of a nominal, we'll say the words without the actions behind it approach, because they are so the number one priority for the NCAA right now is to maintain some at least measure of amateurism in that we are not officially calling these athletes employees of the university. And as long as they can avoid that, which they will eventually not be able to avoid it anymore, but they are going to squeeze every last ounce of blood from this stone before they ultimately lose this battle, which they will. But every bit of enforcement opens the door to a potential lawsuit. And I think everyone at the NCAA level understands that they are one unfriendly judge away from the whole house of cards falling down on themselves.
I had never thought of it like that before, and it hurts my feelings knowing how correct you are.
I'm sorry to do that.
Because I still held out a little bit of hope that they were going to go back and screw Lincoln Riley for that, but if it results in the caving of the entire NCAA, it's probably not going to happen. I know that they have 4 pending lawsuits that are in the next 5 years probably going to shred to tatters their control over the sport of college football. But I was hoping they could at least give Pitt fans one favor before they ride into the sunset.
I hope that there is whatever the sunset looks like is it gives us some sort of opportunity that I don't know. I don't know what all this looks like. I know I've talked to ADs and presidents at schools that are worried about where all of this goes, not because they're worried about paying players or whatever, but just because like what is their place in whatever the next iteration of college football looks like. Um, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if a set of schools that has the money and the bandwidth and the desire to play the Lincoln Riley game on a daily basis wants to do their own thing, and then you can find this sort of middle ground for those places that are like Pitt. That I don't know. I mean, I guess as a genuine question to you guys, like if the future of college football in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years was there's a level like a AAA of the NFL that Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama are playing on, and Pitt's not at that level despite having won national championships in its history. But then there's this second level that's still a really fun, good level of college football that has, you know, the Stanfords and Michigan States and Wake Forests of the world, and Pitt has a chance to win a national championship at that level. Like, is that a good thing, or is that a thing that people would be bummed about?
Right now, I would be bummed about that because I'm even bummed about like the Pac-12 teams leaving for the Big Ten. Just the way we grew up, the way it always was, and it's gonna be so different. So maybe eventually I'd come around to it. Maybe we'd be like soccer fans and be like, "Oh, relegation in college football is so cool. I love this now. How do we ever do it the old boring way?" But I don't know. I think college football fans are so into tradition and take a while to come around, more so than some of the other changes recently.
It would be really hard for me. When I look at college football, I love viewing it the whole 100 and almost 60 years. So it's hard for me to imagine that kind of splintering, and you want to be a part of the league that has the big boys in it, and you want to feel like you're competing. So I have convinced myself that the 12-team playoff is going to save the sport, because I blame the 4-team playoff for the situation we have now, where there's realistically 5 teams that can. I didn't get the 5 in frame. There we go. 5 teams that can realistically compete for a championship every year, because they are able to make it and then use that to sell to recruits, sell to boosters. Like, hey, we made the playoff. I think access to the playoff is going to even the playing field, as well as the transfer portal, where Ohio State can't stock up 5 stars in their quarterback room anymore because these guys want to play, and there's other teams that can make a championship at this point. And in my little Candyland ass dream that I have, it evens the playing field, and we see some of the insane BS that we saw in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Didn't BYU win a national championship? Bring that back.
They did.
Yeah.
I agree. Look,
Keaton Slovis might do it
you.
this year.
I genuinely wonder, and I think there's probably some real truth in what you're saying. The part that just is hard for me to wrap my head around is that we are in the next couple of years going to get to a point where the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Pac, whatever the Pac is going to be, 10, 12, 50, those 3 leagues are going to be making half of the TV revenue that the Big 10 and the SEC is making every year. And one of the things that I've tried to do, because I feel like this is the existential tipping point, is the dollar figures, because it's all I hear about from the powers that be. And I always say, like, well, what does that mean in real terms? Like, what does it mean? What can Patnarduzzi not do because his bank account at Pitt is half of what it is at Penn State?
Land a 5-star. Land any 5-star.
And so in theory, there is, obvious things, but you can only build so many buildings. You can only make a locker room so nice before it ceases to matter. But NIL is already showing that money is going to drive the bus here at some point. And at a point in which I think we will get to where you pay players directly, that's ball game, unless you can find a way to share revenue among leagues more in a more balanced way. And I think it's, to some extent, college football is like if the NFL contract gave the AFC East twice as much TV revenue as the NFC South. And the AFC East was trying to crush the AFC South every year and pull their teams if they got good. Like the whole idea of college football as a sport doesn't work as a business entity because it's really like these 10 different business entities that are fighting amongst each other in what they view as a zero-sum game. So is there an avenue in the future at some point in which everybody says like, well, this isn't great for the sport for Vanderbilt to make double what Clemson makes every year, and we need to figure that out. Maybe, but the next time a rich person says, "Let me give you a bunch of my money to make things fair," will be the first time I've ever heard of it. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it looks like.
So does the ACC have a plan at all, or do we just have to hold on and pray that the Pittsburgh, media market is going to be attractive to the SEC or the Big 12 at some point?
It's funny because my pal Matt Brown, who has a newsletter that he does called Extra Points that he dives into all kinds of cool sort of businessy sides of college sports, and he just he dug in and found a bunch of old emails and exchanges, addendums, letters about the Big Ten expansion following adding Penn State and who they might add. And Pitt was, on the brink of potentially being a Big Ten team had the Big Ten continued its expansion in the early 90s, but they decided to stand pat at 11 and didn't expand, and that was that. The world changed between then and the next time the Big Ten it got bigger. The ACC is in a very weird position because they've got this grant of rights on their TV deal that is sort of forcing everyone to stay together for theoretically until 2036. I've talked to enough folks, and Michael Alford, the AD at Florida State, made some headlines by being very publicly blunt about this earlier this year, is that functionally teams trying to win a national championship cannot survive until 2036, making the amount that they're making now compared to their rivals in other leagues. But there's really no fix. I mean, the only potential answer is the ACC goes to ESPN and says, we're going to die if you don't give us more money, and we're a valuable asset to you. You've got to find a way to make this work. And ESPN, out of the kindness of their heart, says okay, here's a truck of money that you can have, and that's fine.
Can you talk to the mouse about setting that up for us?
Oddly enough, he does not take my calls. Yeah,
tough.
I know. I have said they should just do what I say all the time, but it has not worked out that way.
Oh, well, let's ask you that. If you were a Pitt administrator, Patnarduzzi, the athletic director, what would you do to make sure that Pitt doesn't get lost in the shuffle, aside from just win a lot of football games?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it's even winning a lot of football games doesn't necessarily solve problems because there's so, it's sort of like how they talk about the stock market isn't the real world, the market for expansion and TV eyeballs and revenue is not just wins and losses. I mean, if that were the case, we wouldn't see, again, Vanderbilt wouldn't be in the position that they're in. At some point, somebody would have said, get out of here, Vanderbilt. And Rutgers would not have been invited to the Big Ten when they were, because who cares? They were terrible. They have no history. So it is.
Shiano begs to differ, but I get your point.
Even the metrics that define what makes you an attractive potential expansion option or whatever, even that's changing because we don't really know what TV is going to look like in 10 years either, because when Rutgers and Maryland joined the Big Ten, so much of that was about getting into major TV markets so that you could sell your network on cable packages that had hundreds of millions of subscribers, and didn't matter if anybody was actually watching those teams. The point was that you were part of the cable package there. That's still sort of the case, but you have more and more over-the-top streaming, cord cutting, all of this stuff. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to answer that question. I know that the teams that pack a stadium, have some history, win football games, are in good media markets, and actually will get some eyeballs on a TV. All of those teams are going to have an advantage, but even that's not a guarantee of anything. I mean, Washington has been a historically pretty good football program, and they're in a major market, and they won a bunch of games last year and have national championships, and they weren't one of the ones that were invited to go to the Big Ten. It was UCLA and USC. So I don't know.
So you're telling us that if Pitt builds an on-campus stadium, all of our problems will go away and we're going to get invited to the SEC? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. I do think, not to belabor this point, but I do think that for all the TV money conversations, I think teams, particularly that are in the have-not leagues right now, really need to be considering how do we put butts in the seats of a stadium, because that is one of the few areas that you can control that can actually change dynamics financially. Because what you don't want to be is Duke, that's collecting the ACC paycheck, which is inferior, and you're lucky even if you sell out Duke Stadium, you got 35,000 people or whatever. Like, Clemson has a built-in advantage, and FSU has a built-in advantage because they've got 70 to 80,000 at every game, and that makes a real financial impact. I think investing in getting butts in seats really matters moving forward.
We've been fighting the idea that attendance is the only thing that matters for years because we are between Penn State and West Virginia, the schools that we have affectionately refer to as attendance state, because all that matters is asses in seats. So this is a very sobering conversation about the direction.
We started this by saying I love Pitt fans and I want to help you, and I've done nothing but just bring you down.
Can we transition to something that might be a little bit more pleasant? Okay, thank you. Yes. We'd be super remiss if we didn't get, some thoughts of yours on the 2023 Pitt Football Panthers. Even though it's eventually not going to matter and we're going to wither away to a group of 5 conference as the sun expands into the earth and humanity is wiped out because nothing matters.
We're all living in a simulation anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. So what are the results of the simulation going to be for the 2023 season?
I am, again, I don't want to get anybody nervous. But
give it to us straight, David.
I'm pretty optimistic. I'm a buyer on Pitt right now. I think Jurkovec is a huge upgrade at quarterback. It is really hard to measure anything that he did the last 2 years because he was hurt 2 years ago, and when he came back, he was still hurt. He just wasn't. He was able to get on the field, but he couldn't really throw. And he was playing behind an offensive line last year that may have been the worst in college football, at least the worst in the Power 5. So I have seen enough of Phil Jurkovec over the years that I feel pretty confident he's not Kenny Pickett, but I think a sizable upgrade from Keaton Slovis last year. And I think that's going to allow the offense to be a little more balanced. I think you don't need to be chuck it 50 times a game, Kenny Pickett, but you don't need to be give it to Izzy 40 times a game either this year. I think you can be more of a balanced offense, which is, I think, what Pat would like to be. And then the defense, I don't know, maybe Pat is real good at selling you the Kool-Aid, and maybe I'm just drinking it happily. But when I've talked to him, he seems about as enthusiastic about this defense as you could hear a coach be about a unit that is going to have a lot of new starters. And again, he's just goes down the line on the defensive front, and he's like, I think this guy's going to, Deion Hayes, going to be great. Like down the line, Nakai Johnson, it's going to be great. I think he's going to be great. So, Pat sold me a little bit. I will say that the one area that worries me a bit is sort of the middle of the defense. Like, I don't know how you replace Kalijah Cansey with anybody. I mean, he's really freaking good. And Servassier Dennis was such a good playmaker. And this is one of the things that even Pat was eager to agree with, is such a vocal leader on and off the field, and that's just not easily replaceable. So it's sort of like that middle of the defense is the part where I would say, like, I don't know. But I think there's a good chance that they're better offensively than last year, and they're at least more or less the same defensively. And you win a few that you probably shouldn't have lost last year, and things can be pretty good.
Do you also, speaking of that young defensive line, do you also kind of get the sense that Narduzzi and Partridge were almost pushing some of the older defensive ends out the door a little bit? Because you mentioned some of them. We have some real young talent on the defensive line this year, some blue chip players that Pitt isn't really used to having, that have been waiting in the wings for years behind Haba and Cansey and Deslin Alexander and John Morgan. Do you get the sense that they were almost looking to hit the reset button on that line to give these guys an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody is saying like, "Hey, Kalijah, hit the pavement."
He's a poor example.
So to your point, no, I think you're right. I mean, look, I think, again, look at the numbers, and Pitt has done a really good job of restocking the cabinet when it comes to the defensive front. And with the COVID year of eligibility, I think made everything a little bit crazy, where guys are staying extra years. And some of that's been very good for teams. I mean, I look at like Wake Forest as a program that's really benefited from guys being there longer. But there's, especially in the era of the transfer portal, man, you're asking guys that you think are really talented to sit back and wait another year because guys got another year and they want to stick around. Like, I don't know that all of that is. Again, I don't think a lot of coaches are wanting to push out experienced, productive starters. But I do think that there's more than a few times where coaches, and not just at Pitt, but everywhere, are thinking like, I got this guy that's second on the depth chart. I would really like to play him because I think his ceiling is sky high. But I really can't bench this guy who's done all the right things and been productive either, because it sends a terrible message. And maybe we can find a way that we can all be happy by you going over here and doing this next thing. We put this next guy here. And that was a really good defensive line last year. I'm not going to speculate that it's going to be better this year, but yeah, I think, again, talking to Pat, I don't think he's worried about it in the least.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. I think Pitt fans need to realize that this is a thing that happens with good teams. Georgia, they have all 5 stars. They have 5 stars that hit the road. They can't play. Where do you think this Pitt team, and it's a scary new world, but I think we have some faith in Narduzzi that'll replace the leaving talent. Where do you think Pitt lands in the ACC this year, and how weird will this ACC season be?
Yeah.
No divisions.
It's going to be weird because of no divisions. And I don't, there's a lot of teams that didn't benefit from this and a handful that do. Pitt gets Florida State this year, which is not the best. You would have rather had Florida State, the last few years. Decade. I don't know if this is the right year. I don't know quite what to expect from Louisville this year. They seem completely up in the air to me. I don't know. I think Brom's a really good coach. I think they've brought in some good guys in the portal, but you really never know where that, new first-year coach thing is going to shake out. I look at Carolina. I think there's a good chance that they're going to be exactly what they were last year, real good offensively and real problematic defensively. You got Florida State, you got Clemson. I think those two should be the favorites. Whether or not that holds up, I mean, the history of the ACC, like I always say, like everybody thinks it's definitely going to be Clemson, Florida State now, and the schedule is arranged to make sure that works and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, well, they set up divisions back in the day to make sure it was Florida State, Miami every year, and never ended up happening. So the ACC's best laid plans are not something I'm worried about. I think it is proper to say Clemson and Florida State should be the two favorites, but I am far from saying that is like anything close to a lock to happen. And it quite honestly would not shock me if the whole Clemson has everything fixed because they hired a new OC is not the answer. I don't think Clemson's fallen off of the ledge, but if you told me they, look more like last year's Clemson than whatever this version is everybody's hoping for, I wouldn't be surprised about that if they lose 2 or 3 in the conference. I don't think that's utterly impossible. So I would put Pitt right in that next sort of tier. I think if everything clicks right for Carolina and the defense takes a step forward, they're in the mix. I think NC State has I think they're in a good position with quarterback, and they're going to be pretty good on defense again, and they have a real history of when you think they're going to be good, they stink, and when you think they're going to stink, they're good. So I feel like this is a think they're stinking year, and so they're going to be good. And again, Louisville, I don't know what the hell to make of them. Miami, I don't know, man. That just feels like a bad situation too. So yeah, I mean, if you ask me right now, like, okay, if you say someone of Florida State or Clemson is not making it, who's your pick to make it? I probably would lean towards Pitt right now.
Wow. Over Drake May and UNC. That's high praise.
I just saw too much of that fucking – sorry, am I allowed to say that?
You're allowed to swear, yeah.
Okay. I just saw way too much of that defense last year. I mean, you watch – like I can't shake the idea of you watching Cade Klubnik in that ACC championship game, and he couldn't miss a pass. And then they go to play Tennessee, in which like 3 of Tennessee's guys aren't playing in the bowl game, and he can't hit a pass to save his life. He's running around chasing ghosts. And I'm like, that told me so much more about Carolina's defense than anything else it said about Clemson. Like, they have to take a massive step forward, I think, at Carolina in order for them to be in the mix this year. They got a little lucky. Duke's sort of in the same way of like, I actually think Duke might be better this year and win fewer games because the schedule gets a lot harder and they can't possibly have the luck that they had last year. So I don't know. I think there's sort of a relatively big second tier, but I would probably say Pitt is as safe a bet of that second tier as anybody.
Wow, we love that. Can we hold you to a record prediction?
All right, I pulled up the schedule here so that I have some thoughts. So I assume they beat Wofford. Cincy's an interesting one, but I still feel good about that one. For my own safety, I say they will win at West Virginia.
Smart.
I mean, there's a scenario where they get to at Notre Dame and they're
Phil Dracovic revenge game.
6-1. Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to Notre Dame and Florida State. That back-to-back week of games. I mean, that's a brutal back-to-back. I think 8-4 is probably your smart money. I could see 9-3, and if absolutely everything goes right, I could see 10-2. I think 8-4 is the smart money.
So pretty much any other year for Pitt. The
smart
money.
Yeah.
You can set your watch to us.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still think Sam Hartman's seeing Dayon Hayes in his nightmares. So we have the Notre Dame game, which we are attending, down as a W.
All right. Well, I'm all for it. I would like to see this too. I'm a Sam Hartman fan, but the last time I saw him playing Pitt, things went a little haywire for him. So we'll see how he does this time around. I think that's a fascinating scenario at Notre Dame because I like Sam Hartman. He really got to avoid the worst of criticism after his bad games because he was playing at Wake. When things went bad, they went real bad. And he was in an offense that he executed superbly, but was definitely a unique offense. Like, I don't know how that translates to what Notre Dame wants to do.
One might almost call it gimmicky. So I think we'll be interested.
I'm not doing that because I have too much damn respect for Wake Forest.
Okay.
It's a little gimmicky.
Okay.
It's a good gimmick, though.
For what they have and what they've accomplished, I'd agree.
Get on the Atlantic with it.
Yeah. Well, Dave, this has been awesome, and we really appreciate it. But we can't let you leave without one question. Hold your feet to the fire a little bit. Would you like to apologize for ranking Kenny Pickett as the 6th best quarterback in the ACC going into 2021? And you can apologize by telling us how many Super Bowls he's going to win with the Steelers.
Excellent question. I really need to stop putting up my quarterback rankings in the preseason because they do not go well.
Especially last year, but
those are our favorite things.
What I brutally underestimated was just how good his hair and beard combination is going to be. If I had fully grasped just the luxuriousness of that before the season, I would have absolutely had him as a Heisman finalist. But that's an oversight in my own reporting. And so I take full responsibility. I have him winning 0 Super Bowls, but losing 3 of them to my Eagles. So I think that's something. It's not nothing.
We're done here. We're done here.
At least you need to say you doubted him because of his hands. We'll give you credit for that.
No credit assigned for that answer.
Sorry. I gave you a solid 35 minutes of non-idiocy, and so I just try to throw one in at the end.
That one hurt the most. We're the world's foremost Kenny Pickett guys. I say it without any exaggeration. When he was throwing 10 touchdowns a year for 6-win Pitt teams, we were all saying that is a future Heisman finalist. That guy is gonna. We called him being a first-round pick when he was 18, and we have not backed off of that, despite evidence to the contrary for years. And so we are the absolute number one Kenny Pickett guys, besides his family, in the world.
Well, this is why I can't doubt Pat's enthusiasm whenever he tells me things, because he told me that exact same thing about Kenny. He said, this is the best quarterback I have ever been around. He is going to be an NFL star. And I said, well, he did have 11 touchdowns last year. So, okay, if you say so, Pat. And he was right and I was wrong. So I don't doubt him anymore. I just do as Pat says.
That's a good motto to have for your life. Do what Patnarduzzi says.
What would Patnarduzzi do? I like it.
We're gonna start printing the bracelets. WWPN.
Just make sure you give Pat a cut on those bracelet sales.
Oh, we were too afraid of that man to pull any bullshit like that.
Actually, if I recall correctly, Pat has, because he wears these every year for ACC kickoff. These first of all, I don't think Pat has a large closet full of dress shirts, but the ones that he wears, he has monogrammed with his initials on them that I guess his wife got done for him. And I was like, Pat, that's really freaking classy. And he was like, yeah, my wife did it for me. And I was like, all right. So I don't even know if he'd be a wristband guy, because the shirt
no frills
already is top notch.
No frills.
It comes out for ACC Media Day, and when they go out for their anniversary dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant.
Olive Garden, yeah.
Great. Well, Dave, we really appreciate your optimism and sometimes lack thereof in our Pitt Panthers. We will be coming back to you after Kenny wins 6 or 7 Super Bowls, so just be prepared for that. But outside of that, you have made a friend in the Loyal Sons, so the next time you are in Pittsburgh, please feel free to stop by our tailgate, and we can shotgun a few irons.
I couldn't be more excited about the possibility, and I will have to make this happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time, and best of luck filling time the rest of the summer like we're trying to.
Thanks, guys.
Are you or someone you know looking for work in a recession-proof industry? Are you someone that's interested in things like having health care, having a 401k, immediate PTO accrual, an employee assistance program, or referral payouts? Our newest sponsor, Haddad Accelerated Delivery, an Amazon delivery partner, is looking for safety-minded and dependable drivers to join their delivery service team. Be a part of a company that will encourage self-ownership and award bonuses based on exceptional safety and delivery efforts. This is the ideal gig for individuals seeking full-time work or students interested in making some pretty good money during breaks. If you or someone you know is safety-focused, hardworking, organized, efficient, and team-oriented, text HADD to 464-646 to apply. I understand that is an impossible string of letters and numbers, so here it is again. That's HADD to 464-646. For a job that's the total package, get it? Because, it's deliveries. Hat at Accelerated Delivery is the place for you.